sounds good on some, and hopefully we've corrected it for those of you who've got the buzzing. So, good. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us again for our September Brand Live tasting here from Lodi, California. My name's Camron King. I'm Executive Director here of the Lodi Winegrape Commission, and with me, thank you to both of you. This evening we have Kevin Phillips with Phillips Farms, Michael David Winery, and Adam Mettler, who's Director of Winemaking with Michael David. And it's really an honor to have both of these gentlemen here. One, because they're both good guys, but also because they are sleep deprived and possibly a little bit rummy because we're in the middle of harvest right now. So thank you for taking the time out to be here.
No problem.
The way we're going to go through this fantastic tasting tonight is, I know many of you know about what's going on here in Lodi. I'm going to give you just a little bit of an update on what's actually happening right now, where we're at in terms of harvest 2014. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, tell a little bit more about the vineyards and the Bechthold Vineyard itself, and then we'll kind of get into the wine conversation, because Adam's had the opportunity to work with the wine or the grapes from this vineyard for a while, as well as all the others in the Michael David portfolio and other wineries here in Lodi as well. So I think one of the great parts that we've got going here this year is, as many of you know, is the last two vintages have been pretty large here in Lodi, developing some great quantities of fruits in the vineyard, but as always, wonderful quality. And this year, the vines seem to have taken a little bit of a rest for the most part in terms of production, but the quality continues to be fantastic from all indications that I'm hearing from folks. And maybe a little bit down in terms of production, which actually is probably a good thing, because I think it'll set us up for another great couple of years in the vineyards the next few. But one of the things that I am also hearing is that harvest is a little bit crazy this year, a little bit compressed and coming in. Varieties are coming in at different times and different orders than what they may usually take, and kind of coming in on top of each other. And hopefully maybe in the course of our conversation tonight you can give us a little more idea about what you're seeing out in the vineyards as well. But true to form, Lodi is always an exciting place, and as we've told folks for many years now, we're doing a lot in terms of history and heritage in our vineyards here, and really highlighting and showcasing the fantastic story we've had of growing grapes since the 1850s in our region, and really the experimentation that's coming out of that history and heritage of honing our craft of world-class quality in the vineyards into a sense of experimentation and adventure that allows consumers a great platform for tasting things that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise been trying. Here in Lodi today, we're growing over 100 different varieties of wine grapes, and some of those are absolutely new plantings and new and exciting plantings, everything from German and Spanish, Italian, and varietals from all different corners of the world. But what we're very proud of, like we've mentioned, is our history and our heritage. And tonight, when we try some of these wines, this beautiful Cinsault from the Bechthold Vineyard, it's a prime example of a vineyard that has been tended and worked for many generations, and is a true treasure that exists here in our neck of the woods, and the grapes are being made into beautiful wines that we get to share with you all and with the world, and really allows us to tell about who we are in Lodi and who we are looking to be into the future based off of the traditions that we've had in the past. So with that, like I said, I think what we'd like to do is really just kind of dive into some specifics about the vineyard. I'll have Kevin tell a little bit about his family and some of what he's got going, and then we'll get into tasting some wines this evening. I'll turn it over to you, sir.
All right. Well, as Cameron said, we are in the middle of harvest, and it is a slugfest this year. I think Adam and I calculated earlier today that I think we're just crossed the halfway point. We're tailing down on Zins, finished with Syrahs, almost done with Petite Syrah, and pretty much just working on Cabs and Petit Verdot now. And just trying to, we got past the hump and getting past that, getting to that next finishing that last half of harvest. So probably about 3 more weeks here of sleep deprivation, and if I say anything crazy, I'm just going to blame it on that. And anyways, Cinsault, we finished picking that vineyard on my birthday, August 28th this year. So
happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you. So Cinsault has been off the vine for almost a month now, and pretty nice year all around. Quality's looking phenomenal. This year we got 77 tons out of the vineyard, just a hair over 3 ton to the acre average for the entire block.
Well, it's interesting too that when you think about it, you know, we're looking at a 25-acre vineyard, and you're getting 77 tons off of it. It really kind of, to me, tells me that those older vines don't produce as prolifically as maybe some younger vines do. Is that what you're finding? And you know, or is it a matter of farming practices that you're seeing from folks?
No, I mean, I think absolutely there's a major correlation with older vines and reduced yields. And you know, one of the things Lodi is known for is its zins, and one of the reasons Lodi has these big luscious zins is you've got these old vines that are really stingy in production, and they don't produce a lot, but they produce a really intense grape, makes a really intense wine, and the Cinsault is no different. You know, those Zinfandels, other than it's just it's an anomaly in terms of being a variety that's unheard of anywhere in the world, and being that old.
Sure. Well, and it's a special spot, and you know, if anybody has the opportunity to go out and kind of walk amongst these old gnarled vines, it really kind of almost makes me sit back and think, what have these vines seen in their lifetime? And it's pretty impressive. I mean, they're 128 years old today. They're not today, but you know, at this point in time. And so that's pretty phenomenal, the history that they've seen over the course of their lifespan.
Oh yeah, we got a live feed in that vineyard. We can show a picture of it.
Live shot to the vineyard, Jenny. They have a few more leaves on them this time of year.
Apparently it got frosted yesterday, and I wasn't aware. Yeah. And pruned.
Exactly. So Kevin, there's a question from Dizelle in Virginia. He asked, how did the vines survive phylloxera? What are some of the conditions in the vineyard that actually allows them to be 128 years old?
Well, it is it is amazing, especially being considering that it is own rooted. I'd say the biggest factor in that is that it is a complete and utter sand pit. I mean, I've dug soil pits out there 30 feet, and there's not a single difference in the stratus of soils. It's just pure sand, and that's not very conducive to phylloxera.
Sure. Well, and that's part of that interesting kind of conversation about so many of the old vines in this area have the benefit of that sandy soil and not having been victim to phylloxera, but yet at the same time, there's so many of our old vine zins as well as the Cinsault that are own rooted, and it makes it really special. Do you find it that farming own rooted versus something that's been grafted over onto St. George, let's say, is farming a little bit differently? Do you think that they produce differently? What are some of the differences that you see, if any?
I mean, in general, the own rooted vines, they're never going to be, so many of the rootstocks have been bred for yields, and own rooted vines, that's just not an issue. So they're just producing what they're naturally going to produce. But of course they have no resistance at all to nematodes or phylloxera or drought or other conditions. So they are definitely susceptible to a wide range of things that are out there that can hit them. But luckily in Lodi here, so with the sandy soils, the phylloxera is not really an issue, and the nematodes, especially with a lot of these old vines, they've been originally started or farmed on furrow irrigation, and so the water is going down, and those roots are going down really far, and I think they're going beyond a lot of the zones where the nematodes are acting too, thus keeping these vines alive and well.
That makes sense. Now, the Bechthold Vineyard itself sits kind of on the western side of the Lodi AVA. sits kind of close to I-5, closer to Interstate 5 than it does to Highway 99, and kind of benefits from some of those cooler delta breezes in the evenings than maybe as you get up towards the foothills portion of the district. Do you find that the growing conditions and the geography and topography and all of those factors play into both the soil profile as well as the growing conditions that allow the Cinsault to thrive?
Yeah, I mean, personally, where the Cinsault is located is one of my favorite areas just in Lodi in general. You've got this sandy loam soil, and you're on the closest edge of the delta that you can be. So it's one of the coolest areas in the district. So I think it produces a certain terroir over there that just is very unique to itself.
Sure. And you mentioned something to the talking about irrigation. The vineyard's mostly dry farmed, right?
So this is this is actually kind of funny. So this is a dry farm vineyard, and it is truly dry farm vineyard. But Jenny, maybe you can pop a picture up for me real quick of my interpretation of dry farming. Absolutely. So both of them. So there is me pumping out of the well with a giant pump, and there is me dumping water into this vineyard. So I started irrigating this vineyard about 4 days after we harvested it, and again from September, mid-September last year until September 1 of this year, it did not get any water other than what nature provided. So it is a dry farm vineyard, but especially due to the drought and me doing everything in my power to keep this vineyard alive and well, I have been giving it a really good shot of water post harvest. And when I say good shot of water, we've been doing this since September 1, and a few days ago we estimated that we are approximately 100 acre feet of water in that vineyard. So if I put a fence around that vineyard and we filled it up 4 feet high, that's about how much water I've put on that vineyard. And I'm just really trying to, I'm drenching those roots, I'm getting water deep into the profile, I'm drowning any kind of mammals and things that I don't like out in that vineyard. I'm just, I'm whacking them the good old-fashioned way. And, and besides that, we have like any area in Lodi, we have we have an aquifer, and, I think it's part of my responsibility and anybody's responsibility that has access to surface water is to utilize that in the vineyards. It's good for the vineyards, and we're replenishing the aquifer. That's a benefit for the whole.
Sure. Well, and it's also showing that it's specific uses of water. It's not just watering all throughout the growing season for the sake of watering, but it's with a purpose to it, and it's also setting up to protect this vineyard so that you don't have this root zone drying that you're going to end up losing this amazing piece of heritage.
Well, I mean, we've been in historic drought, so this ability to irrigate it is great. It's kind of difficult because you guys saw the pump that's in the canal there. Well, I've actually got to pump that water to the very north end of the vineyard, and then it irrigates back towards the canal because of the way the vineyard slopes. So we're running pipe all the way down the vineyard and then irrigating it back. And when we start doing it, it actually takes about maybe 7-8 days from when we start the furrow before it even reaches the other side, because it's such a sandy vineyard.
Sure.
But I love this vineyard, and I'm doing everything in my power to keep it alive and well. And since my tenancy in taking over it, I think everybody will say that this vineyard is actually getting healthier.
Sure. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to be working with the vineyard and a little bit about the history of the vineyard itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my family's been farming in the Lodi appellation since the 1860s, and the original piece of property that we homesteaded in the 1860s is right next to the Bechthold Vineyard. So when I came back to the family operation after college, I started taking over the farming operations, and my Woodbridge Vineyard is right next to the Bechthold Vineyard, and so I'm farming that, and I start running into this really great old guy named Al Bechthold. And he's my neighbor out there, and so we're talking, and he'd run into me, and we just talk, and next thing you know, my winery, my family's winery, Michael David, starting to grow a little bit. And you know, we talked, but we didn't really talk about vineyards that much. We talked about important stuff like hunting and fishing, and you know, drinking wine. But anyways, you know, my family had just started growing the operation, and you know, the next year I remember asking Al, you know, hey Al, I really like to buy some of these Zinfandel, and he looked at me and he goes, they're not Zinfandel, Kevin, they're Black Malvoisin. And I was like, what is that? And he's like, well, I'm not really sure either. You know, just an old variety, you know, and he shipped them back east. And anyways, the next year, in '03, we found out that it was actually Cinsault. Kay Bogart with UC Davis got some DNA testing done on them, and we found out what the variety was. And we had a small Rhone program at the time. And so I started, you know, in '04, started purchasing some of the grapes from Al as Cinsault. And so '04 was the first year that my family and, you know, actually got these grapes, and we started working with them. And over the years, you know, was buying the grapes from Al, and I'd bring in my own crew and picked it, and you know, and I was farming next door. And as Al started getting on in the years, in '07, he asked me to take it over. And so, since you know, since late '07, I've been farming the vineyard since.
Very cool. Well, Adam, maybe if you wouldn't mind, maybe we could pour the wine, and you could tell us a little bit about making wine out of this vineyard, and what you think of working with grapes that are grown on vines that are sold. So we're going to start with the Michael David Ancient Vine Cinsault. And then tell us a little bit about yourself too, Adam, if you would mind.
First of all, it's a treat to be able to make wine from a vineyard with so much history. Like we were saying earlier, I mean, the things that this vineyard's probably seen over the years makes it awful special to be able to create wine from it now. You know, this vineyard's seen many faces in the winery for Michael David early on. We would put it into a Rhone blend like Kevin was speaking to, you know, a fair bit of oak. Then it kind of transitioned into where we began making rosé. We did rosé for about 3 years out of the vineyard. And then it kind of transitioned into what it's become now. And really what that is you know, we're trying to really just make something reflective of the vineyard. So pretty much hands-off, you know, kind of winemaking. Usually it comes in, you know, mid-20s in bricks level. We do a little cold soak, a little partial carbonic maceration style. Pretty speedy fermentation, and off to neutral barrels is pretty much our protocol. So this year's currently it's already in barrel. It's almost through malolactic fermentation at this point. So it's looking great. Low 14 alcohol, good color, good concentration.
Do you find that from year to year there's variations, quite a bit of variation from coming out of this vineyard, or is it pretty consistent?
I'd say it's pretty consistent. You know, obviously bricks levels have a lot to play with that, and year to year certainly we see a difference given you know, what nature brings us that year. But all in all, the aromatics and the different characteristics of the wine shine through year to year.
Yeah, it's got that beautiful fruit and a little bit of the spice to it. I think but yet it's got a nice mouthfeel, but not so over the top that it just takes away everything out of your mouth. It's really just a beautiful, beautiful wine. You know, I like to think that sometimes this vineyard is kind of like the George Burns, kind of gets a little more elegant, but yet still has that kind of spicy punch to it.
Yeah.
In a little bit of a way where it's a real fun alternative to traditional wines that people have tried. So often Cinsault gets blended away. Was it just because the vineyard itself that you guys decided to start doing standalone Cinsault?
You know, year to year, it's always been a great wine, and you know, we had a use for it in that blend. So I think just by default, that's where it was going. Mm-hmm. But you know, certainly over the years, as we've grown, you know, as a winery as well, and had different needs for different things, it just presented itself. And certainly what Kevin's been doing in the vineyard has a a big impact on what we've been doing in the winery. So
Sure.
we've just kind of followed suit with those changes.
I've always thought that, for me, this is a phenomenal alternative to like Pinot Noir.
Sure.
Oftentimes people are like, Pinot, after Sideways, Pinot had this huge fan base and this demand, and then people were looking for something a little bit different. And I think that this is a nice complement in structure and complexity, but has a little more to it with the spice and some of the fruit flavors that you're getting out of it.
Yeah, it's always, even when we made rosé or whether it's a red wine, it always has this real nice strawberry character to it that lots of people mention that are making wine out of the vineyard, and that character rings true year after year.
Absolutely. So, in addition to you guys, there are a number of other wineries that are also getting fruit out of the vineyard, including those that we have here this evening. But we were talking beforehand, and you were saying 17 or so wineries are getting little bits and pieces of Cinsault, some making standalone Cinsault varietals, and others blending.
The majority of the Cinsault. So if you guys look at the map, you'll see a canal, which should be the south end of the vineyard, and there's a little gray strip that is cut off that parallels that canal, and that's what we designate for the rosé section, because it gets a continual seepage from the canal, so that section is a little bit more vigorous. The berries are a little bigger. It's not quite as intense of a fruit. And then the rest of the vineyard, which is approximately about 21 acres, is designated for reds. And between those, there's probably about 13 or 14 red wines, Cinsault, standalone Cinsauts being made from this vineyard. And you see the vineyard, it's got maps, and everybody's got their sections. But even within these sections, there's people within these sections that are getting, my sections, for example. I've got 5 acres designated for me, but I give a half a ton to 3 different guys. So, they're not quite big enough to warrant their own rows, but they get a little bit, and they get to make a Cinsault out of it as well. And Estate Crush, one of the wines we'll taste in a little bit. Nick has an 1.5 acre section, but he actually makes wine for a couple other clients as well that make a Bechthold Cinsault from this thing. So,
Sure.
So there's quite a few people in here, and it's kind of interesting, being it's a 25-acre vineyard, and when it's said and done, between the red and the rosé, there's about 17 buyers.
Wow, it's amazing. Well, and I think when all is said and done, this is a phenomenal bottle of wine. I mean, the fact that it retails in the ballpark of about $25, I think it delivers a beautiful, beautiful wine for a great value, a very approachable price point. So, why don't we move on to our next wine of the evening? We're going to go to the Turley, and Tegan Pasalacqua, who's the winemaker and vineyard manager for Turley Wine Estates, has been getting fruit out of this vineyard for a number of years now.
I believe since '08.
Okay.
Tegan is a good buddy of mine. He is a great guy. He has a passion and love for old vines that is really unparalleled. And what's really nice about him, being that he's a Napa guy and a 707er, he actually really loves Lodi. He even loves it so much that he bought a vineyard over here.
Right.
And so, he's actually slowly getting pulled in this direction. So it's kind of nice that I can pull someone the other way.
He's learning the ways.
Tegan's actually getting the reverse commute, as I like to say, and it's very refreshing.
But this is another great example, like you were saying, of somebody who's been so dedicated to preserving and protecting heritage vineyards. Tegan was one of the founding members of the Heritage Vineyard Society, and I think this speaks to exactly why he would want to be involved. I mean, this is such a special and unique vineyard. I always liken to say that this is arguably the oldest Cinsault vineyard in the world, and this, I think, speaks to a site that needs to be protected because it makes beautiful wines, but is also something that has a lot of depth and meaning, both to the family, but also to this region, and I think that's fantastic. So why don't we taste the wine and see what we think about it. It's a little different characteristic on the nose.
Yeah, a little spice.
Yeah,
it's nice.
Tegan is, when it comes to this vineyard, he is always he's the very first to pick. So it usually coincides when I'm just tailing down with the white harvest for Michael David, and Tegan he'll call me and he'll basically ask for the most inconvenient day for me to pick, and that's when he'll schedule. And so
at least you know it's predictable.
Yeah, exactly. There's a benefit to that predictability, I suppose. But Tegan's been in this vineyard since '08. If you actually look on the map, you'll notice that Tegan has the largest section in the vineyard. He even gets more than I do. But he's been so good, and he's been so helpful in the promotion of not just the Bechthold Cinsault, but just Lodi in general. That I hope Tegan and Turley are in this vineyard forever.
Well, I think this is a good question for both of you. Kovos from 50 States of Wine asked, do you think that there's the differences in the wine come from the different sections of the vineyard and or the winemaker themselves? Can you maybe speak to the vineyard and then winemaking out of that in the different areas?
There's definitely differences in the vineyard. Tegan's section, which is the westernmost section, or Turley section, is by far the most vigorous section of the vineyard, the strongest section of the vineyard, and then as you move east, the vineyard gets a little bit weaker, and then on top of that, Tegan is the first to pick. So like this year, Tegan picked on the 18th of August, and myself and Onesta, we finished on the 28th. So there's about a 10-day swing there, but Tegan's always the first. He's this is a natural ferment, so he is specifically targeting acid when he wants to pull the trigger on this vineyard. And it's traditionally when we pick for him, it's usually right around the 21.5 bricks range.
Sure. Well, and you do get that acid. You kind of get that crispness, that real fresh, clean mouthfeel to it, which is nice.
Well, he's going for that. They're doing the completely natural approach. That's a very hands-off winemaking, but I think it really speaks to the the terroir of this vineyard and and what it's like with minimal intervention.
Absolutely.
On any given year, too. I mean, one bricks up or down can change the character a little bit, and we do have a couple of vintages here too, so we could have some differences in wines, not only from the winemakers or the vineyard, but also just from the vintage variants. But I think on the winemaking side, certainly there's going to be some differences. Everyone's doing a little bit different thing, whether it's a longer cold soak or no cold soak, or carbonic or partial carbonic, or different yeast strains or no yeast strains. I mean, just there's all kinds of differences on the winemaking side too that I think can continue to shift differences, a little bit newer oak, older oak, so I think it's a combination.
Sure. Was there a vintage that you had more fun working with that you can think of out of this vineyard?
I'll be honest, I missed the rosé day a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes a wonderful rosé, which, a lot of people are making rosés
right
still. And, that was a fun time too.
Sure.
But certainly what we're doing now is great too.
Right.
But a certain vintage over the whole swing, I'm not sure one particularly stands out. Just the progression of the vineyard and the wine in general has been fun to be a part of.
Great. And the vineyard is farmed organically, correct?
It is farmed organically.
And sustainably.
And sustainably.
All right. Got to put the plugs in there first.
It is farmed organically, mostly due to coercion from wineries such as Tegan. It is farmed sustainably because that is my vision, and that's what I want for all of my vineyards, including the Cinsault that I'm the caretaker of.
Sure. Well, and you guys have been at Michael David and both in the farming operations, but also in the winery, have been so supportive of the Lodi rules for sustainable wine growing. And it's, again, many of you have had the opportunity to taste wines that are certified or are made under the Lodi rules for I cannot speak all of a sudden. Lodi rules for sustainable wine growing practices from fruit that have been certified under that program, and that's a real testament to, again, paying homage to the past and the history, but also looking to the future to ensure that our vineyards are still present for our children, our children's children, and that's pretty spectacular. So there was a question we had that the standalone. I missed that one. So, what would be a natural? How many wines are making standalone Cinsaults out of this vineyard? You were saying.
I think there's
a large portion of
I think there's probably about 14 that are that are standalone vineyard designated Bechthold Cinsauts, and then there's I think there's about maybe 2 more Cinsauts that are blended as a portion of a blend, and then there's a good chunk. Most of the rosé producers, not all of them, but most of them use the rosé section as a portion of their rosés, but there is a few standalone Bechthold rosés as well.
Sure, like Jillian, Onesta.
Yeah, Jillian being one of them.
Exactly. Well, and we're obviously not tasting the rosé from Onesta today, but it will be fantastic if you have the opportunity to try it. It really does, like you were saying, Adam, this vineyard makes a beautiful rosé as well. So there was a question at one point that I saw come by that said, is the retail price really $17 on this wine? And so we've been told it is, and I think it absolutely could command more than that. But everybody has their own business models. So I think this is a beautiful wine, and it's a nice contrast. I mean, to try both the Michael David and the Turley, they're both very distinct in their own rights, and have some of those similarities of that nice fruit and that little bit of spice to it as well, but are both very pretty wines.
Yeah, I mean, every time I've seen the Turley, it is about $17, and I think that more than anything, if Turley charged more, then they know I'd probably charge them more for the vineyard, so they're going to just hold that price.
Well, maybe that's a conversation for you guys to have. I'm not going to enter into that one. But it is a very nice wine, and I think it shows another beautiful example of what can be done with the fruit from this vineyard. And like we often tell people, it's another example of folks from outside the Lodi region recognizing the quality and the absolute approachability and the beauty of making wines out of grapes grown in our vineyards. And so we see this more and more, that there are great wines being made from Lodi vineyards from folks all over California and all over the country. And Turley is an example of someone who's done that, not only with this Cinsault, but also with a couple of their Zinfandels, and who knows, maybe more to come in the future.
I hope.
Does Bechthold command a higher or lower price due to it being older and Cinsault?
Well, I believe Bechthold's price is based just specifically on that vineyard. I don't think the price of Cinsault is going to be specifically extraordinarily high the way this vineyard usually is. Just because somebody else has Cinsault and Lodi, it's very specific to this vineyard. But in general, I'm going to say that prices for grapes are higher, especially from older head prune vines, because from a grower's point of view, it's an economic thing, and if it gets to the point where they're getting $500 a ton, for a 3 ton to the acre vineyard, it just doesn't make sense. And so that's why it's really nice to have these multiple winemakers from all over the state coming in here and buying Lodi fruit, and and commanding and putting prices in a bottle that make them money and also make the growers money and give them a motivation to keep those vineyards in the ground, because Lodi's got a lot of old vineyards, and I want to cry every time I see one of them get pulled out.
Right. Well, and if you haven't had the opportunity to come and visit us yet here in Lodi, I think that's one of the things that you'll be amazed with is the sheer quantity of these beautiful old vine vineyards that we've got, that as you walk around, they're very, very different. As you travel around the region and you walk through these vineyards, you just get a sense of history and place. You get to see these gnarled old vines. Some Zinfandel vines are much larger and have been pruned and trained very differently. almost vertical, others are almost laying and creeping across the ground. There's not just one thing, but there's so much diversity in our old vine vineyards and in our younger vineyards as well. It's pretty spectacular. So it's something to definitely, if you haven't had the chance to do yet, come out and visit us, and we'll take you through our vineyards and really share our people and our history and our story with you. So why don't we move on to the estate crush? And estate crush is a different model, a different business model here in Lodi. It's kind of, I have horrible depth perception, so the fact that I didn't spill it down in front of you is a lucky thing. It's a really a fantastic model. It's kind of a cooperative winery and tasting room, allowing for growers and smaller wineries who may not have the opportunity to create their own standalone facility to be able to come in and custom crush in a collective space. And they are working with fruit out of here under their own label, the Estate Crush label, as well as making wines for others, as you had mentioned. And so this is a great way to be able to share some wines with other folks, because I know that you said that they're making some Cinsault for some of their other winery clients.
Yeah, I believe they have a couple other winery clients Estate Crush has an acre and a half that's designated for them, which is going to give them approximately 5 tons of fruit, maybe 4. And, so they utilize some of it for their own wine, which has been consistently phenomenal. And then they make that wine for a few other clients. They're traditionally on the second half of the pick in the vineyard, but not the tail end. So they're kind of a late middle when it comes to when they pull the trigger. They Nick Sikiotis, one of the owners of Estate Crush, along with the Colorossis, actually has a very personal connection to the vineyard. His stepmother is Wanda Bechthold, and one of the the owner of this vineyard.
Great. So there's a great question. In this vineyard, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face?
Well, I see the clients there, and that is actually very funny. Somebody understands dealing with multiple winemakers, obviously.
Right.
I have enough of a hard time dealing with just my own winemakers, and I write the check. But
as Adam smiles, shakes his head.
He's going to argue that I occasionally write the check, but no, I mean, as an organic vineyard, it's got all of its own challenges, and pests are definitely one of the biggest issues. Spider mites are a major problem, especially in a dry farm vineyard that is undergoing, especially in these drought years, a lot of stress, and that's what those mites trigger on. A lot of organic growers are going to really stick with a conventional model, and they're just going to switch materials when it comes to combating the issues that come up in a vineyard. But instead of using this material, they're going to use this material because it's organic. I try to go with the mind frame of, if I've got a problem in the vineyard, whether it's certain pests or something else, is what kind of things in farming can I do that I can tweak it so that problem is no longer there. So one of the things with mites that I dealt with in this vineyard, mites were blowing up in this vineyard, and we would, when we first started doing it, I would have to spray stylet oil. And it's a material that, it would knock down the mites, and then, 2 weeks later they'd be there and I'd have to do it again. So I'm continually, putting footprints or tracks in the vineyard, and that's not what I wanted to do. So I started using this material called Surround, what is essentially diatomaceous earth, and I started spraying the vineyard with the DE. And basically that DE is acting as a reflection of the sun. It's reducing the inner ambient canopy temperatures, and therefore slowing down the mite's life cycle. And I think that is keeping them from blowing up on me. And then we've started inoculating it with predatory mites as well. So I think that combination is keeping the mites at bay. And so that's some of the things I'm constantly trying to do in this vineyard to keep it alive, keep it healthy, and to farm it organically.
And I don't think a lot of people really realize that a lot of times, that integrated pest management, it's not a matter of just taking and saying, you know what, I want to put something on here to get rid of bugs, but there's actually ways of saying, you know what, there's predatory mites that I can put in here that's a natural predator to take care of a pest, and that could be a problem. And I don't think there's a lot of people that think about that very often, but it's one of those that is absolutely an option, and it's great to hear that you're utilizing it. On this wine, you know, you mentioned that Nick's got the family connection into the vineyard, and so it's probably a lot of fun for them to be able, at a state crush, to be able to work with fruit from this vineyard and have that connection. But I can't help but, as I was tasting this, thinking about what you were saying earlier, Adam, that, you know, sometimes with Pinot, people expect that those strawberry notes, and this one pumps up the kind of flavor profile from the previous two wines a little bit. It kind of amps it up, but I'm still getting that strawberry fruit out of here, and
Right.
and some of those other red fruits, those dark red fruits, that I think are really nice, that bring out some very different characteristics. I saw that Fred Swan was earlier saying that he'd pair this one with lamb, and it doesn't sound too bad. Maybe it's because I'm hungry, but
Yeah, you have any lamb, Jenny?
But this is a really nice example of the Cinsault that's kind of pumped up just a notch.
Well, this is this is a 2012, and this was even though 2012 was a large vintage in general for Lodi, it was actually a pretty light vintage in the Cinsault, and I think the 2012 in general showed a little bit more intensity with this vineyard.
Do you think that's based off of the fact that the production was a little bit lower, a little bit lighter, and really just a concentration into the berries?
I mean, in 2012, I got the stats right here. We got 3.03 ton to the acre. It produced exactly 75.95 tons. You know, in 2013, the two previous wines we just had, it was actually the highest it's, I think, ever been. It was at 4.14 ton to the acre.
Wow.
So, I mean, there was a 25% increase in 2013 as opposed to 2012, and I think there's a few nuances just of that, a little bit larger of a crop, on the 13 as compared to the 12.
Sure. Now, Adam, in the cellar, when you're making wines from this, do you ever get frustrated by the fact that some years you have more to work with than you do in others, and you want to play around with and try something different? Are you experimenting with anything with Cinsault, or are you just going in and saying, we're just doing this?
Yeah,
or do you make a little bit of that rosé that you like, and you just don't tell Kevin about it?
Well, we've certainly experimented through the years as far as style and how to process this fruit and what program it might go into. But I think over the last 2 or 3 years, we've kind of refined what we're trying to do with it and what we're trying to create. And at this point, it's pretty typical of our processing every year. It's
Sure.
It's one of our easier wines to make, in the sense that it's not a high alcohol wine. It's not a big extraction wine. It's there's no blending. There's no big oak profile. So it's a real minimalist winemaking approach.
Sure.
So from a winery perspective, the wine's gotten easier to make.
Okay.
And certainly, its profiles kind of come into its own over time.
Sure. And now so many of the winemakers here in Lodi are kind of sharing and collaborating and talking about what they're doing, and I would imagine that's probably the same out of this vineyard. You guys that are working with fruit from here, talking about things. Some of the other kind of winemaking styles, does anybody ever do whole cluster fermentation that you know of, or?
I know that Turley does for sure.
Do they?
We open the rollers in the crushers. I'd call it a partial.
Okay.
It's certainly not a 100% whole cluster.
Okay.
But we do welcome as many whole clusters as can get through the destemmer.
Sure. Sure.
So I don't know amongst the rest of the group who else might be doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a like I said, I'm presuming that you guys have the chance to talk as winemakers and as much as you possibly
can. A little
can.
bit, it's with everything. Everyone's so busy.
Right.
It's hard to set that kind of time aside. But certainly there's been some conversations, and everyone has learned this vineyard a little bit together and kind of fine-tune their own wines as well. So it's everybody, at least over the last few years, kind of come in together. So I think it's been a collective effort on styles and processing.
Great.
Yeah.
I think there's a consistency in flavors that's going to carry across the board with this, and so.
Absolutely.
But as this vineyard has evolved and the multiple producers have cemented themselves into this vineyard, I think there's also a consistency of styles that each one of these producers is starting to hone towards, and I don't think that we're any different. I think we've kind of found our niche with where we want Cinsault to be.
Great.
And it's not a huge variance anymore.
Got it. Do you see a future for Cinsault? I mean, out of this vineyard, the production is somewhat limited, but as a varietal wine, I mean, so often Cinsault had been blended away. Do you see a future for standalone Cinsault as maybe, like I said earlier, an alternative to Pinot Noir?
Personally, no.
Okay. No, that's cool.
I've seen what Cinsault looks like in a more traditional production. I actually have a few acres over at the winery site itself. It's a very, very tough grape to manage because it is gigantic clusters. It is big berried. Cinsault, in a more traditional production method, I think it could be fine as a standalone rosé, but I think it's the dry farming, the age of this vineyard that creates the intensity that even allows this variety to be a red.
Sure.
I just don't see it having much place in modern in modern winemaking as a red wine, other than a vineyard like this.
Right. And maybe if Jenny could take us back out to the vineyard just to show us what that cluster kind of looks like. It's the first time we've had these interactive photos interactive live vineyard shots. But they are, for an old vine, they are, like you were saying, they're big, dark clusters. Pretty spectacular.
Yeah. So if you see those in a younger vineyard, you'll see that those bunches are even bigger. Those berries are even bigger, and they definitely don't have the black coloring that is inherent to the Cinsault vineyard, to the Bechthold's vineyard.
Sure. Well, I don't want to run out of time, but just to give you a quick rundown, the Estate Crush retails at about $26. And one of the biggest shames, I think, is the size of the vineyard. I wish it could be larger so that people could produce more, because I love the wines that are coming out of here. But that makes it that much more special. So we'll move on to the Onesta. And this is the 2011, so we're actually going back even 2 years further on this one. And Jillian Johnson is the winemaker and proprietor at Onesta, and she's been working with fruit from this vineyard for quite some time now, originally kind of honing her craft in this vineyard at Bonnie Doon. So you've had a relationship with Jillian.
Jillian has definitely been, since, we started buying Michael David started buying the fruit in 2004, and Bonnie Doon started buying it at the same time. And so when that was happening, I was running into Jillian in the vineyard, and then as I got to take over and Jillian went her own way, she originally with Phoenix and now with Onesta Winery, her own winery, I got to deal with her personally and interactively, specifically in regards to this vineyard and buying the fruit. And Jillian she is a great gal. She's a live wire, and what's really nice about Jillian is if she goes out in the vineyard, these Cinsault vines, they're only so high, kind of squatty. She's the only winemaker that can hide out there. She's about 5'0", and my nickname for her is Strawberry Shortcake because she's a little redhead, but she's a sweetheart, and 5'0", and she puts me in my place all the time. And she makes a hell of a wine.
She does. She makes fantastic wines, both the red Cinsault and, like we were saying earlier, a nice rosé from this vineyard as well, which comes from, as you were saying, a different portion of the vineyard, kind of back by the canal.
Right.
Now, again, help us all understand, again, the reason that that's kind of the designated rosé area of the vineyard is because of the proximity to the canal and the soil?
Right. So this canal that parallels the southern edge of the vineyard, there's it's an older canal, and there's a lot of there's sections of dirt in there. The sections of concrete have lots of cracks and stuff, and there's this just inherent seepage that happens, and so that seepage is going into the vineyard, and these vines in this 4.5 acres of the vineyard are getting a lot more water. So even though they're dry farmed, they are reaching down and they are sucking out this water that is leaching from the canal, and this makes the rosé section makes more of what a traditional modern Cinsault vineyard would look like. The bunches are much bigger, they're lighter in color, and traditionally the yields in this section are about double what they are the rest of the vineyard.
Really? That's amazing. And it's one of those that she gets from both the red section.
She is one of the very few that gets the red and rosé and makes a standalone rosé with it.
This wine's got the strawberry again, showing a little more weight.
It is.
A little more structure.
So Jillian is always on the tail end, and she's usually the very last one to go with the vineyard, and she's also in one of the weakest sections of the vineyard. So the section that she's in, it struggles a little bit harder. It's more exposed, and so she always makes a wine that's it's a little bit bigger than than everybody else. I believe she also traditionally does a little bit of a Saunier on this, and so she usually makes a pretty weighty wine for Cinsault, at least, and I love it.
Absolutely.
That's
I mean,
great.
this is, it's got so much more depth and body to it than what you might expect out of a Cinsault, and it's really just, I think it could hold up to a lot of different kinds of food.
Sure.
It's a beautiful food wine. It's still got that spiciness to it that we've been talking about that I think is a trend across all the wines. This one, I think, goes, like you said, it has that strawberry, but I think for me it also kind of goes into those, dark blues and like the blueberries and some of those as well, kind of get a different kind of tartness and richness out of the wines that it's really nice. It's funny that you mentioned that she is kind of that little short, fiery personality. She is an absolute sweetheart. I was coming back from a conference up in Seattle, and she happened to be sitting on the plane, and as I'm walking, since I sit back in the cheap seats, she's sitting up a little closer, and she, hey, how are you? And freaks you out. But it's also one of those where she calls you on your stuff. What are you doing up here? I was at a conference. It's all right. So, but just she's a great lady, wonderful winemaker, out to have a lot of fun. Really enjoys what she's doing here and making beautiful Lodi wines. Another one of those that's from over on the other side of the
On the other side of the hill,
the other side of the hill
but
over
she's
in Napa.
definitely got an appreciation for Lodi.
She does, and she's now got some placement in some of our collective tasting rooms down in downtown Lodi, and so I think she's going to be one to be watched going forward too, of doing some more wonderful things with Lodi fruit. And I think it's a fantastic testament to this vineyard too, that her first exposure to it was with Randall Graham from Bonnie Doon, so long ago, and even in the different iterations that she's had in her career has stuck with this vineyard, and it's been her constant. It really speaks to not wanting to let go of something special. And that's fantastic, and I think this vineyard will continue to garner more and more recognition this year. It was at the California State Fair recognized as the 2014 Vineyard of the Year, which is again a spectacular testament not only to the history and the family who's farmed the vineyard and planted the vineyard 128 years ago, but to today and what you're doing with the vineyard today to really keep the vineyard alive, keep the vineyard going, and producing these great grapes that make these beautiful, beautiful wines that we've had tonight, in addition to the others.
Thank you.
On this wine, just so you know, the retail on this one is about $29 and 370 cases produced. So again, it's pretty special. The alcohol on this one is one that I don't have the answer to. 14? Ballpark code?
It's labeled at 14.5, so it's probably low 14s.
Yep.
I'm assuming.
Yep, in that ballpark. But yet, it's interesting, lower alcohol, but still got a good body to it. Really, really nice. So do you gentlemen have any parting thoughts on this vineyard, or anything that maybe we've missed over the course of the last hour that you'd like to share, either working with the grapes or producing the wines, or the grapes that make these great wines?
Well, I'm happy to field any questions from from our viewing audience.
Sure. Well, and I think we've had some that have been peppered along the way, and I know that we've tried to get to some of them, and Jenny's also responded to quite a few of them throughout the course of the evening. But if we don't have any other questions, there's one there. Where are these wines available? I think, I don't know, do you guys have any of them in distribution?
We do very little distribution with Arson, so I mean, this is for us approximately 700 case program. Okay. One of the, if not the very smallest, program that we have at our winery.
Sure.
And it is primarily for us a tasting room only wine club, type wine.
And I think that's probably the case across the board, from my understanding. And for those folks who may not have a tasting room like Onesta, she's got presence at cellar door. But outside of that, most of these wines can also be made, or are also available online or in the tasting room. And I think it's that smaller production that you can only get it out so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's whenever anybody asks for it distribution-wise at our winery, we just kind of shut them down, or it's like, all right, we'll give you 2 cases, but you better sell 50 cases of something else if you want these 2.
Right. This is something special.
Yeah, exactly. You got to lean on them a little bit.
Exactly. I like that. Well, this I think has been a really interesting evening. It's thank you for sharing the story of the vineyard and all that you're doing to keep it going forward, and thank you for what you're doing in the cellars to make a beautiful wine out of this, and to the other winemakers as well, and to all of you who joined us. And I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to Jenny Heitman, our marketing and communications guru, who's been here kind of running behind the scenes. But again, we want to take this opportunity, and we know that some of you have been here, and we appreciate the opportunity to share Lodi with you. But this is just one facet and one very special place here in Lodi. And so we want to offer to you all a very warm invitation to come and visit us in our vineyards and in our cellars, meet the fantastic people who have been growing grapes for a long time, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. And for those of you, our next brand live tasting is on November 5th, and we are going to be focusing on Tempranillo at that one, another new varietal that is doing quite well here in our vineyards and is growing in some great recognition. So cheers to you all.
Cheers.
And thank you very much.